In a dense forest, two young sisters discover an injured park ranger and his canine partner, Ranger. As the officer clings to life, Ranger acts desperately, trying to alert the girls to an unseen danger. No one could have foreseen the shocking truth the dog was trying to reveal. Luna and Maya, their light backpacks swaying rhythmically, followed a less-traveled trail deep in the heart of the national park. Birdsong echoed through the trees, a natural symphony accompanying them on their daily adventure. The scent of damp earth and dry leaves filled the air, and the sun filtered in golden rays through the dense canopy, painting the forest floor with patches of light and shadow. They laughed, exchanging secrets and plans for the rest of the day, unaware of the twist of fate awaiting them. Suddenly, a different sound broke the tranquility, a sharp bark, followed by a low, continuous whimper. It wasn't the joyful bark of a playful dog, but a sound laden with despair. The sisters stopped, their smiles fading from their faces. "Did you hear that, Luna?" Maya whispered, her eyes wide. Luna nodded, her breath caught in her throat. "It sounds like a dog in trouble." Curious and a little apprehensive, they veered off the trail, following the sound that pulled them deeper into the dense foliage. With each step, the bark grew stronger, more urgent, mixed with a low, guttural growl. Luna's heart pounded against her ribs. Then they saw him. In a small clearing, beneath the shade of an ancient oak, lay a uniformed man. It was Sergeant Evans, the park ranger they occasionally encountered on the trails. His uniform was torn in several places, and a dark, wet stain spread across his side, dyeing the grass crimson. His head was turned to the side, eyes closed, and he lay motionless. Beside him, a massive German shepherd, Ranger, spun in tight circles, howling and scratching the ground with his front paws. His brown eyes were fixed on the girls, filled with palpable anguish. He tugged at the sergeant's sleeve with his mouth, then released it and barked at the sisters, as if pleading with them to understand something only he knew. "My God, he's hurt!" Luna exclaimed, rushing to the sergeant. Maya followed, shock paralyzing her for a moment before the instinct to help took over. Approaching, they noticed the gravity of the situation. Sergeant Evans was pale, with a deep gash on his forehead, and the bloodstain on his side seemed to be slowly expanding. Luna knelt, trying to check the ranger's pulse at his neck. Ranger, however, didn't stop. He sniffed the sergeant, then nudged his snout against Luna's arm, a hoarse bark escaping his throat. He didn't seem to want them to touch the visible wound. Instead, he began to tug at Maya's pant leg, trying to pull her away from the ranger's body. "Ranger, calm down." Maya tried to soothe him, but the dog was beyond consolation. He released Maya's pants and, with surprising agility, began to push his snout and paws against Sergeant Evans' tactical vest, specifically on his chest area. His barks were now shorter, more focused, almost as if he were trying to point to something. Luna, still trying to staunch the visible bleeding with a handkerchief, felt a pang of confusion. "What's he doing? Does he want us to look at the vest?" Ranger, as if understanding, barked again, a piercing sound that echoed through the forest, and vigorously scratched the vest. There was an urgency in his movements that went beyond an animal's usual desperation. It was as if he knew the real danger wasn't in the open wound, but in something hidden, something the girls couldn't yet see. The silent, deadly truth was pulsing beneath the surface, and Ranger was determined to reveal it. Luna and Maya exchanged a look, confusion mixed with a growing fear. Ranger wasn't just distressed, he was on a mission. The dog's piercing bark and frantic scratches on Sergeant Evans' tactical vest were impossible to ignore. He wants us to look at the vest?" Luna repeated, her voice weak, still kneeling beside the ranger. The dark stain on the sergeant's side seemed to have grown a little larger, and his breathing was shallow and irregular, a wheezing sound that cut through the air. Maya, overcoming her initial shock, approached the German shepherd. Ranger stopped scratching for an instant, fixing his deep, intelligent eyes on Maya's. He let out a low whimper, almost like a command, before nudging his snout again against a small Velcro flap on the upper part of the vest, near the shoulder. "He's pointing to this!" Maya exclaimed, her intuition sharpened by the animal's urgency. She hesitated for a second, then, with trembling hands, followed Ranger's indication. She peeled back the Velcro flap, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside, wrapped in clear plastic, was a laminated card and a pre-filled syringe. Luna's heart leaped. She crawled closer to Maya, her eyes fixed on the objects. "What is that?" Ranger, seeing that the girls had discovered the compartment, let out a bark of relief, but his posture still conveyed extreme tension. He nudged his snout against the syringe, then the card, and then the sergeant. The message was clear, almost painfully obvious. This was important, and it was for him. Maya picked up the laminated card. Bold, capitalized words jumped out at her. "Emergency Protocol. Sergeant Evans." Below, concise instructions described a rare blood-clotting condition and the need for an immediate injection of a specific medication if the sergeant was unconscious and showed signs of hemorrhage. The pre-filled syringe contained the coagulant. There was even a simple diagram showing where to apply the injection. On the thigh. "Silent internal bleeding," Luna whispered, reading over Maya's shoulder. "That's why Ranger didn't want us to focus on the visible cut. The real problem is inside." A shiver ran through both sisters. The dog's intelligence and perception were astonishing. He wasn't just distressed. He was trying to save his partner's life in a way no human could have imagined without the vital clue of the protocol. Sergeant Evans let out a weak groan, and his body twitched slightly. The paleness in his face now had a grayish tint, and his lips were bluish. Time was running out. "We have to do this," Maya said, her voice firm despite the panic that was beginning to set in. "Ranger showed us what to do." She looked at the dog, who was watching them with an intensity that almost seemed human. He let out an encouraging whimper and gave Maya's arm a gentle nudge with his snout, as if urging her on. Luna nodded, adrenaline pulsing through her veins. "I'll read the instructions, you apply it." Carefully, with steady hands, Maya took the syringe. The liquid inside gleamed faintly under the sun's rays, filtering through the leaves. Never in their lives had they imagined they would be in such a critical situation, with a man's life in their hands, guided solely by instinct and the astonishing intelligence of a dog. The forest, once a sanctuary of peace, now echoed with the silent urgency of imminent death and the hope of an improbable salvation. Sergeant Evans' life hung by a thin thread, and the weight of the decision rested on the shoulders of two teenagers and the unwavering intelligence of a dog. Maya took a deep breath, the fresh forest air unable to calm the tremor in her hands. The syringe, once a clinical and distant object, was now the key to the park ranger's survival. Luna, with the protocol card in hand, read the instructions aloud, her voice surprisingly steady. "Clean the thigh area, Maya. Then insert the needle at a 90-degree angle. Push the plunger slowly and completely." Ranger, sitting on his hind legs, watched them with an almost painful intensity. His brown eyes, once full of despair, now held a silent expectation. A low whimper escaped his throat, a sound of encouragement and urgency. Maya nodded, cleaning the sergeant's thigh with gauze Luna had found in her backpack's small first aid kit. The ranger's skin was cold to the touch. With one last look at Ranger, who seemed to nod in response, she positioned the syringe. Maya's heart pounded like a drum in her ears. She felt the prick of the needle on the skin, a moment of hesitation, and then pushed the plunger with a determination she didn't even know she possessed. The liquid disappeared into Sergeant Evans' body. A heavy silence descended upon the clearing. Only the distant bird song and the soft rustle of wind in the leaves broke the stillness. The sisters held their breath, watching the sergeant. Ranger, in turn, lowered his head, gently sniffing the ranger's face, an almost inaudible lament escaping his mouth. Minutes dragged like hours. The bloodstain on the sergeant's side seemed to have stopped growing, but he was still pale and unconscious. His wheezing breath, however, seemed a little less strained. A fragile hope began to blossom in the girls' chests. Suddenly, a distant sound broke the silence, the growing hum of an engine. It wasn't the sound of a car on the road, but something larger, heavier. The hum escalated into a thunderous roar that made the leaves on the trees vibrate. "A helicopter!" Luna exclaimed, pointing to the sky. Ranger lifted his head, a strong, jubilant bark echoing through the forest. He had been heard. In a few moments, a park ranger rescue helicopter emerged from among the treetops, its rotor spinning with a deafening force. It hovered over the clearing, and soon a rescue team descended on ropes, followed by an emergency medic and 2 officers. The paramedics immediately rushed to Sergeant Evans, assessing his condition with professional speed. One of the officers, a burly man with a serious face, approached the girls, his eyes scrutinizing them. "Are you two all right? What happened here?" he asked, his voice trying to rise above the helicopter's noise. Luna and Maya, still in shock and with adrenaline receding, tried to explain. We found him. Ranger showed us what to do. He was bleeding internally," Luna began, her voice choked. Maya picked up the laminated card and the empty syringe, handing them to the officer. "He had this in his vest. Ranger made us find it. It's a coagulant." The officer took the objects, his eyes widening as he read the emergency protocol. He looked at the sergeant, then at the girls, and finally at Ranger, who was now lying beside his partner, gently licking his hand. The emergency medic, who was monitoring Sergeant Evans' vital signs, looked up. "His vitals are stabilizing. The hemorrhage seems to have stopped. If it weren't for this injection, he wouldn't have lasted much longer," he said, his voice carrying ill-concealed astonishment. The officer looked at the sisters and Ranger, his eyes reflecting a mixture of shock and admiration. The forest, now filled with voices and the sound of the helicopter, bore witness to the miracle that had just occurred. No one could have predicted that Sergeant Evans' life would be saved not by technology or human expertise, but by a dog's intuition and the courage of 2 girls. Ranger, the silent hero, had completed his mission. The officer, still holding the laminated card and the empty syringe, glanced at the medic, who nodded gravely, confirming the urgency of the situation. His eyes, previously fixed on the scene, now turned to the sisters with an intensity that made them shrink slightly. You said Ranger made you find this?" he asked, his serious voice cutting through the helicopter's constant roar. "How exactly did he do that?" Luna, feeling her body tremble now that the adrenaline was beginning to dissipate, tried to explain, her voice a faint whisper. He was pulling at us, barking, scratching the sergeant's vest. He didn't want us to focus on the wound on his leg. He kept nudging his snout at that Velcro flap here." She pointed to Evans' vest, where the hidden compartment was now open. "It was as if he knew there was something important there." Maya, still holding the first aid kit, added, "He made us read the card and showed us the syringe. He even nudged his snout at the syringe and then at the sergeant. We just followed what he was telling us." The officer frowned, assimilating the story. It was unbelievable, but the evidence was there. Sergeant Evans alive, the emergency protocol followed to the letter, and a dog who now lay calmly beside his partner, merely observing the commotion with attentive eyes, but without the previous hysteria. One of the paramedics, who was securing the sergeant to a special stretcher, looked at Ranger and shook his head in admiration. "I've never seen anything like it. This dog is more than a service animal, he's a genius." The helicopter blades pulsed in the air, and the rescue team worked efficiently. Sergeant Evans was carefully hoisted onto the stretcher, and the paramedics prepared him for air transport. Ranger, with a soft whimper, stood up and tried to follow the stretcher, but was gently restrained by one of the officers, who petted him. "Good boy, Ranger. You did an incredible job." As the sergeant was slowly lifted towards the helicopter's opening, Luna and Maya felt a wave of exhaustion wash over them. The relief was immense, but it came with overwhelming fatigue. Luna's legs trembled uncontrollably, and Maya felt a knot in her stomach, a mixture of nausea and delayed shock. The officer, whose name was Agent Miller, watched them for a moment. "You two, you just saved a life, and your friend here." He gestured to Ranger, who now sat beside him, head held high, eyes fixed on the helicopter preparing for takeoff. "He's a true hero." Agent Miller then adopted a more formal tone. "We need to take you to the ranger station. Your parents need to be notified, and we'll have to take your full statements about what happened. This is a very unusual situation, and what you did is extraordinary." The helicopter, with Sergeant Evans on board, began to ascend, the deafening noise gradually diminishing as it gained altitude and moved away. The sound transformed into a distant hum, and the clearing, once a chaos of voices and machines, began to return to its natural quietude. Though for the girls, nothing would ever be truly natural again. Another officer approached, a radio clipped to his shoulder, and spoke with Agent Miller about logistics. It seemed a car was waiting for them on the trail. Ranger, with one last look at the sky, where the helicopter was now just a tiny speck, turned and walked to the girls, nudging his snout against Maya's hand. It was a gesture of gratitude, of recognition, worth more than 1,000 words. Luna and Maya stood up, swaying slightly. Their bodies ached, their minds exhausted. The forest, which hours earlier had been a place of adventure and fun, now carried the weight of an experience that would mark them forever. They had faced death, and guided by an extraordinary dog, had brought life back. As they were led out of the clearing, with each step, the reality of what they had done solidified. They were no longer just two girls exploring the park. They were witnesses to a miracle and protagonists of a story that the forest would guard in its silence, but which the world, undoubtedly, would soon come to know. The journey back to civilization was just beginning, and with it, the repercussions of their heroic acts. The journey began with the weight of silence. The clearing, which minutes before had been a stage of chaos and miracle, now seemed to sigh in relief, its trees swaying gently to the rhythm of a wind that whispered ancient secrets. Luna and Maya followed Agent Miller and the other officer, their steps heavy with exhaustion. Each dry leaf beneath their sneakers crunched, a sharp sound that seemed amplified in the newly restored quiet. The scent of damp earth and conifers filled the air, an aroma that once meant adventure and now carried the vivid memory of danger and salvation. Ranger walked beside the girls, his snout occasionally brushing Maya's hands, a constant reminder of his loyal presence and the unbreakable bond that had formed in those hours of despair. His brown eyes, once filled with urgency, now observed the path with a serenity that contrasted with the sisters' internal turmoil. The adrenaline that had driven them to act began to dissipate, leaving behind a trail of uncontrollable tremors and muscle aches that spread through their bodies. Luna felt her head throb, and Maya could barely keep her eyes open, the image of a pale, bleeding Sergeant Evans still vivid in her mind. The trail seemed endless, but finally the distant sound of an engine grew clearer, and soon a park ranger vehicle emerged from among the trees, its lights flashing softly. As they approached, they saw a woman in uniform who appeared to be a paramedic and a man with a radio in his hand who waved to them. Agent Miller opened the back door for the girls, and Ranger, with an agile leap, settled on the vehicle's floor, nestling at Maya's feet. The car's interior, with its smell of upholstery and equipment, was a completely different world from the forest they had just left. The drive to the ranger station was made in an almost reverent silence. Agent Miller, in the passenger seat, spoke occasionally into the radio, his voice low and serious, while the officer at the wheel maintained a steady pace. The forest landscapes passed like a blur outside the windows, and Luna and Maya allowed themselves to sink into the seats, their minds still processing the enormity of what had happened. They were just two girls who went out to explore, and now they carried the weight of a life saved. Upon arriving at the station, the atmosphere was one of contained agitation. Other park rangers and officers circulated, their curious and admiring glances fixing on the girls and Ranger. The sound of ringing telephones and low voices filled the air. A woman who introduced herself as Captain Ramirez, a high-ranking officer, greeted them with a serious expression, but her eyes revealed profound relief. "Your actions were nothing short of heroic, girls. We are all in shock and immensely grateful," she said, her voice firm, but with a touch of emotion. The first priority was to notify their parents. Luna and Maya watched as Agent Miller made the call, his voice calm and professional, explaining the situation carefully. Minutes later, the sound of a car approaching rapidly and the chief ranger rushing to the station entrance, followed by their parents, who hugged them with a force that almost suffocated them. The parents' tears of relief and cries of worry were a testament to the anguish they had endured. It was a mutual relief, a reunion that felt like a miracle. After calming down and drinking some water, the girls were taken to a more private room, where Agent Miller and Captain Ramirez began to take their statements. The questions were detailed, and they relived every moment, from the encounter with the sergeant to the vital injection. Ranger, lying peacefully at their feet, was silent proof of every word. Captain Ramirez listened intently, her eyes fixed on the animal's intelligence, which seemed to comprehend every detail of the narrative. It was evident that their story would not just be a police report, it would echo far beyond the walls of that station. As night fell and the station lights shone in the dark, Agent Miller mentioned something that made the girls' hearts leap. Sergeant Evans is stable at the hospital, and the story of how he was saved. It's already spreading. Get ready, girls. The world will want to know what happened here today. The sound of a radio tuning into a news station in an adjacent room confirmed his words, and a voice began to narrate with astonishment and admiration the extraordinary rescue in the national park. The repercussions of their heroic acts had indeed begun. The voice on the radio in the adjacent room was clear, laden with a tone that blended astonishment and admiration. In an extraordinary turn of events at the national park, two young sisters, Luna and Maya, along with a park ranger service dog, German Shepherd Ranger, are credited with the miraculous rescue of Sergeant Evans, who was in critical condition. The sound of the news, echoing through the station's corridors, made Luna and Maya's hearts pound again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was a strange mixture of pride, disbelief, and an overwhelming dose of exhaustion. In the room where they sat on uncomfortable chairs, their parents hugged the girls tightly. Luna and Maya's mother, her eyes red from crying, stroked their hair, murmuring words of relief and gratitude. Their father, his face pale, squeezed their hands, his voice choked. "My girls, are you all right? What really happened out there?" The question, repeated in a whisper, was laden with the urgency of someone still trying to piece together a nightmare that had just ended. Agent Miller and Captain Ramirez observed the scene with professional seriousness, but there was a glimmer of something more in their eyes. Respect, perhaps. Ranger, oblivious to the human commotion, lay calmly under the table, his breathing soft and steady, a point of calm amidst the turmoil. He lifted his head for an instant when Sergeant Evans' name was mentioned on the radio. his brown eyes fixed in the direction of the sound before resting again. "It's okay, Dad," Luna managed to say, her voice still hoarse. We just did what Ranger showed us." Maya nodded, leaning her head on her mother's shoulder. "He saved us. He saved the sergeant." Captain Ramirez cleared her throat softly, drawing attention. "Your parents need to take you home now, girls. You've been through an ordeal and need to rest. But as the news is already circulating, it's likely the press will want to speak with you. We'll try to manage that as best as possible, but it's important that you're prepared." Agent Miller added, "A park medic will do a quick assessment before you leave, just to ensure there are no injuries or lingering effects from the shock." A paramedic, who had already checked the girls' pulse and blood pressure, confirmed they were physically well, despite the shock. The sound of a distant siren ripped through the night's quiet, and Captain Ramirez explained it was the arrival of more teams, including public relations officers, to handle the wave of interest that was sure to come. As Luna and Maya's parents helped them up, Ranger also rose, stretching with a silent yawn. He followed the girls out of the room, his steps firm and confident. The ranger station was now buzzing. Several television cameras were being set up outside, their powerful lights illuminating the night's darkness. Journalists spoke into microphones, their voices muffled by the glass, but the excitement was palpable. "Don't worry about them now," their father said, trying to shield his daughters from the impending harassment. "We're taking you home." But before they could leave, a man with an ID badge approached Captain Ramirez, speaking quickly. She nodded and turned to the girls. "There's a reporter from a major news network here who insists on a brief statement. He promises to be quick and respectful. It would be important for the official narrative." Luna and Maya exchanged a look. The fear was still there, but also a strange sense of responsibility. They had saved a life, and the world needed to know how. Especially, the world needed to know about Ranger. With their parents by their side, the girls were led to a more private area, where a journalist awaited them, microphone in hand. The camera lights came on, and the reporter began to speak, his voice deep and calm. "Girls, can you tell us what happened from your point of view?" Luna, feeling Maya's hand squeeze hers, took a deep breath. "We found Sergeant Evans. He was injured," she began, her voice a little shaky but gaining strength. "And Ranger, he wouldn't let us give up. He showed us what to do." Maya completed, her eyes fixed on the camera. "He's the real hero." Ranger, who was sitting patiently beside them, let out a slight whimper, as if agreeing. The sound was captured by the microphone, and a smile spread across the journalist's face. It was the beginning of a story that would transcend local news, a testament to the extraordinary connection between humans and animals, and the courage of two sisters who, on an ordinary day, became unlikely heroines. The world was listening, and Luna, Maya, and Ranger's lives would never be the same. The forest had kept its secret for a time, but now the roar of truth echoed everywhere. The reporter, with a smile that blended professionalism and genuine admiration, lowered the microphone and the camera lights dimmed, plunging the small room into a softer twilight. The click of the camera was followed by a bright flash that momentarily blinded Luna, but she felt the immediate relief of no longer having the world's eyes fixed on her. The truth had indeed roared, and now it echoed in every corner. "Excellent, girls. Thank you so much for your courage and for sharing your story," the journalist said, his voice now softer. "That's all for now." Captain Ramirez and Agent Miller approached, their faces showing a mixture of weariness and pride. "You were great," Captain Ramirez affirmed, placing a gentle hand on Luna's shoulder. "Now let's get you home." Luna and Maya's parents, who had been by their side throughout the interview, hugged them again. Their mother, handkerchief in hand, wiped away the last tears while their father led them out of the room. Ranger, with his unwavering loyalty, followed closely, his body brushing against Maya's legs, a constant reminder of his presence. As they exited the ranger station, the scene was even more chaotic than before. Several television news vans were parked, their antennas pointing towards the night sky. The murmur of voices and the sound of incessant flashes mingled in the air, creating a deafening symphony of curiosity. Reporters crowded the entrance, microphones extended, their questions overlapping. "Girls, how do you feel? What was it like to save a life? The dog's a hero, isn't he?" The twins' father, with Agent Miller's help, pushed through the crowd, shielding his daughters with their own bodies. Luna felt a knot in her stomach, her head spinning with the intensity of the attention. Maya flinched, burying her face in her mother's shoulder, the sound of flashes popping like small explosions around her. Ranger, however, remained calm, his vigilant eyes sweeping the crowd, a silent shield for the girls. Finally, they reached the family car. The sound of the door closing was a relief, muffling the commotion outside. The vehicle's interior, though familiar, felt like a sanctuary after that day. Ranger, after a brief command from Agent Miller, jumped into the back seat, nestling between Luna and Maya, his warmth comforting. The drive home was made in a heavy silence. Their parents exchanged worried glances in the rearview mirror, but said nothing, allowing their daughters to process the enormity of what had happened. City lights began to appear on the horizon, replacing the shadows of the forest. Luna watched the trees pass by, the image of the injured Sergeant Evans, and Ranger's determined gaze replaying in her mind. She could still feel the prick of the needle in her hand, the metallic smell of blood, the urgency of that moment. Upon arriving home, the house seemed strangely empty, despite everyone's presence. The familiar scent of jasmine and coffee brought immediate comfort, but the feeling of normalcy was distant. Their mother prepared hot tea, and their father turned on the television, but the sound of the news about the rescue, with images of the ranger station and a photo of Sergeant Evans, was quickly turned off. It was too soon to relive it. Luna and Maya sat on the sofa, Ranger lying at their feet. The exhaustion was immense, but sleep seemed impossible. Adrenaline still coursed through their veins, a constant hum in their ears. "You were so brave," their mother said, her voice choked, sitting between them and hugging them. "I never thought my girls would go through something like this. We just followed Ranger," Maya whispered, stroking the dog's head. "He knew what to do." Their father, sitting in a nearby armchair, sighed. "Captain Ramirez called. Sergeant Evans is out of danger, that medicine. It was crucial." He paused, his eyes fixed on Ranger. "And what you did, the world will remember it." A soft bark from Ranger echoed in the room, as if he understood every word. He lifted his head, his brown eyes meeting Luna and Maya's, a sparkle of intelligence and affection. That dog, who had guided them in the darkness of the forest, was now an unbreakable link to a day that had changed everything. Life, as they knew it, had transformed into an extraordinary story, and they were the protagonists alongside a four-legged hero. The future, though uncertain, promised a journey of recognition, and perhaps, who knew, many more adventures. The first streaks of sunlight crept through the curtain gaps, painting golden stripes on the living room rug. Luna woke on the sofa, her head resting on a cushion, her body numb. Maya slept deeply beside her, curled up, her face still marked by exhaustion. Ranger was nestled at their feet, a warm, comforting weight, his soft breathing raising and lowering his plush body. The morning silence was profound, broken only by a distant birdsong and the gentle ticking of the wall clock. For an instant, Luna forgot. Her mind, still hazy with sleep, tried to cling to the familiar routine, to lazy Sundays and the smell of fresh coffee. But then, the image of the injured Sergeant Evans, the prick of the needle, Ranger's urgent bark, all came back in an overwhelming wave, making her heart race in her chest. She sat up, the blanket slipping. The smell of coffee and toast wafted from the kitchen, a reminder of the normalcy trying to reassert itself. Ranger lifted his head, his brown eyes meeting hers, a silent recognition passing between them. He let out a small whimper, then stretched, before getting up and nudging his snout against Luna's hand. Maya stirred, a murmur escaping her lips before she opened her eyes. "Good morning," she whispered, her voice still hoarse. "What time is it?" "I don't know," Luna replied, feeling the weight of the previous day still upon them, "but I think Mom and Dad are already awake." The sound of muffled voices came from the kitchen, and soon their mother appeared at the living room door, a tired but loving smile on her face. "Good morning, my heroines. Did you sleep well?" She approached, sitting on the arm of the sofa and stroking both their heads. "Coffee's ready, and you won't believe what's happening out there." Their father entered right after, a tablet in his hand, his face a mixture of concern and pride. "The phone hasn't stopped ringing, and the internet. You two are the talk of the moment." He showed them the tablet screen. News from all corners of the country displayed their photos, Ranger's image, and headlines like "Hero Dog" and "Brave Twins Save Park Ranger." A video from the ranger station showing the crowd of reporters played on a loop. Luna felt a shiver. The attention was overwhelming, even from a distance. Maya flinched slightly, seeking comfort from Ranger, who sat beside her, his head resting on her thigh. "Captain Ramirez called again," their mother said, serving coffee. "She said Sergeant Evans is recovering very well, and your story is spreading like wildfire. There are interview requests from national television shows, magazines." An insistent ring at the doorbell broke the house's silence. Their father sighed. "It's probably more press. I'm sure they'll come right here." "We're not answering," their mother decided firmly. "You need peace. We're going to turn off the intercom and phones for a while. We need a normal day as much as possible." But normalcy seemed a distant luxury. With every sound from the street, a passing car, a louder conversation, the girls flinched a little. Ranger, however, seemed unperturbed. He watched the family with his intelligent eyes, as if understanding the turmoil, but maintaining his calm. As they drank coffee, their father explained that Sergeant Evans had expressed a desire to see the girls and Ranger as soon as he was stronger. "He wants to thank you personally," their father said, his voice soft. "And Captain Ramirez mentioned that a recognition ceremony is being planned by the park, for you and for Ranger." A ceremony. The idea was both daunting and exciting. They had acted on instinct, guided by an extraordinary dog, and now they were about to be celebrated. The weight of responsibility of being an example began to settle. Ranger, as if sensing the change in the air, let out a low bark, a sound that seemed to echo the promise of a future that, though full of challenges, would also be filled with moments of pride and perhaps many more adventures. The house, once a refuge, now felt like a starting point for an unexpected journey, where the courage and loyalty of a dog had rewritten their destinies. The world was waiting, and they, with Ranger by their side, were ready to face it. The decision not to answer the door did not diminish the buzz outside. On the contrary, it seemed to intensify it. The twins' father peeked through a crack in the living room curtain, his face contorted in a grimace of frustration. "They're not leaving," he murmured, his voice low so as not to alarm the girls. Outside, the click of cameras mingled with the sound of muffled voices and the hum of a video camera that seemed to be constantly recording. The doorbell rang again, an insistent sound that pierced the protective silence of the house. Their mother turned off the phones, the intercom, and even the Wi-Fi, creating a bubble of isolation that paradoxically made them feel even more trapped. Luna and Maya sat in the kitchen, their coffee cooling in their cups. The smell of toast, which once brought comfort, now seemed a bittersweet reminder of the normalcy that was slipping away. Ranger, with his usual calm, lay under the table, his head resting on his paws, his attentive eyes sweeping the faces of each family member as if assessing the tension in the air. "We can't stay here forever," Maya said, her voice small, almost inaudible. She stroked Ranger's soft fur with her fingers. Luna shook her head. "But we can't go out either." The thought of facing that crowd again made her stomach churn. The flashes still popped in her memory, the sound of overlapping questions, the feeling of being an object of curiosity. Their father sat at the table, running a hand through his hair. "Captain Ramirez called me from a private number. She wants to know if we can visit Sergeant Evans this afternoon, privately, without the press." A glimmer of relief crossed his face. "She'll meet us at the hospital and ensure our privacy." The news brought a small ray of hope. Seeing Sergeant Evans, knowing he was well, was something the girls deeply desired. It was a way to close the circle of that nightmare, to see the positive outcome of their courage. Hours later, under the discreet escort of a park ranger car, the family managed to leave the house without being noticed by most of the reporters, who had dispersed but still maintained sporadic vigilance. The drive to the hospital was tense, but the anticipation of seeing the sergeant outweighed the nervousness. At the hospital, Captain Ramirez awaited them, her uniform impeccable and her warm smile offering immediate relief. "He's eager to see you," she whispered, guiding them through silent corridors where the smell of antiseptic hung in the air. The room door opened, revealing Sergeant Evans. He was sitting up in bed, pale and with a bandaged arm, but his blue eyes shone with immense gratitude. Seeing them, a wide smile spread across his face. "Luna! Maya! It's good to see you!" His voice was a little weak, but carried the same kindness the girls remembered. Luna and Maya approached hesitantly. Ranger, who had been allowed into the room, let out a soft whimper and trotted to the bed. Nudging his head against the sergeant's free hand, Evans smiled, stroking the dog's fur. "My good boy," he murmured, his voice choked. "Sergeant Evans, how are you?" Luna asked, her voice a little shaky. "Much better, thanks to you," he replied, his eyes welling up with emotion. I don't know how to thank you, you and Ranger. You saved me. I wouldn't have survived without your courage and intelligence, and without my partner's persistence here." He looked at Ranger, who wagged his tail vigorously. "That medicine. No one would have thought of it. You were incredible." Maya, more at ease now, held the sergeant's hand. "We just followed Ranger. He knew." Evans nodded, emotion overflowing. "He's more than a dog. He's a hero. And you girls are his heroines." The room fell silent for a moment, filled only by the soft sound of medical equipment and Ranger's comforting breathing. Sergeant Evans's sincere gratitude was a balm for the girls, who felt overwhelmed by the media's attention. There in that hospital room, the enormity of what they had done became real and tangible, not just a newspaper headline. Captain Ramirez gently intervened. "The sergeant needs to rest, but first he asked me to give you something." She took a small, shiny new park ranger badge from her pocket. "He wants you to have it, as a symbol of your bravery and the bond you now share with the park." Luna and Maya took the badges, their fingers brushing the cold metal. It was a simple gesture, but laden with meaning. It was the recognition that mattered, coming from the person they had helped. As they said goodbye, Sergeant Evans held Luna's hand. "I'll be there at the ceremony, girls, to applaud you and Ranger. I can't wait." The mention of the ceremony brought back a pang of nervousness. They had saved a life, but now they would have to face the stage, the speeches, everyone's eyes. Leaving the hospital was calmer, and the family returned home, where their father managed to reconnect with the world. The phone immediately began to ring, but now the family was stronger, more united. The visit to Sergeant Evans had solidified the truth. They were heroines, and with Ranger by their side, they were ready to accept this new chapter of their lives, even if there was still a flutter in their stomachs. The sound of the phone ringing non-stop now seemed less an intrusion and more an invitation to the future that awaited them. The sound of the phone persisted, but the insistent melody now sounded different. It was no longer an alarm siren, but a chorus of distant voices, all clamoring for their attention. The family sat in the living room, their father with the phone in hand, their mother beside him, watching their daughters. Luna and Maya, each holding their park ranger badge, felt the cold weight of the metal in their palms. The shine of that small object was a tangible reminder of the life they had saved, a counterpoint to the confusion of sudden fame. "Captain Ramirez is calling again," their father said, his voice calmer now. "She wants to discuss the ceremony details. It's in 3 days." 3 days. The countdown began. The nervousness that had subsided at the hospital in the face of Sergeant Evans's sincere gratitude returned with force. A ceremony meant a stage, microphones, and the inevitable television cameras. "But what about the press?" Maya asked, clutching her badge. Ranger, lying at their feet, let out a soft sigh, as if understanding her anxiety. Their mother smiled, a smile that conveyed strength and affection. "Captain Ramirez assured us there will be strict security. Entry will be controlled and you won't be exposed more than necessary. It will be an event to honor you and Ranger, not a media circus." Luna looked at Ranger, who raised his head and gazed at her with his intelligent eyes. He seemed to say, "I'm with you." The German Shepherd's calm presence was a safe harbor amidst the storm. In the following days, the house became a planning headquarters. Their mother helped the girls choose appropriate outfits, nothing extravagant, just something simple and dignified for the occasion. Their father, in turn, coordinated with the park rangers and Captain Ramirez, ensuring that all details were carefully considered to protect the twins' privacy. News of the ceremony spread, and anticipation grew. The park, once a refuge of tranquility, now prepared to receive hundreds of people. Journalists continued to try to obtain information, but the family, now more experienced, stood firm in their decision to speak only at the right time. Luna and Maya spent hours with Ranger, walking in the backyard, playing fetch. In these quiet moments, the imminence of the ceremony seemed less daunting. They talked about Sergeant Evans, about what they would do with their badges, and about the strange feeling of being heroines. "Do you think we'll have to give a speech?" Maya asked Luna on one of these walks, the afternoon sun gilding the grass. Luna shrugged. "Maybe just thank everyone. I don't know what to say. I just did what Ranger showed me." A low bark from Ranger, like a silent agreement, made them both smile. He was the true mentor, the silent guide who had led them down a path they never could have imagined. On the morning of the 3rd day, the day of the ceremony, an unusual silence hung over the house. There was no incessant ringing of the phone, nor the buzz of the press outside. Captain Ramirez had sent a discreet park ranger car to pick them up before dawn to avoid the commotion. The girls wore simple but elegant clothes. Luna's heart beat a rapid rhythm, but beside her, Maya seemed a little more confident, holding Ranger's leash. The dog, with his shiny coat and noble posture, seemed ready for his moment of glory. Upon arriving at the park, the family was led to a reserved area. The stage was set beneath a large oak, adorned with wildflowers. Hundreds of chairs filled the lawn, and a crowd was already beginning to gather. The air was charged with expectation. Luna peeked from behind the stage curtain. The sun was already rising on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. In the distance, she saw Sergeant Evans sitting in a chair in the front row, still a little pale, but with a warm smile on his face, and beside him, Captain Ramirez, with a look of pride. A microphone crackled, and a voice began to announce the start of the ceremony. Luna's heart leapt. It was time. Ranger, with a gentle tug on his leash, called her forward. The flutter in her stomach was still there, but now, mixed with it, was a wave of determination. They had saved a life. They had a purpose. And with Ranger by their side, they were ready to step onto the stage and accept their destiny. The sound of applause, still distant, was already beginning to warm the air. The distant applause transformed into a wave of sound that swept across the lawn, growing in intensity as Luna and Maya, hand in hand, took their first step towards the stage. Ranger, his collar gleaming under the morning sun, walked with impressive dignity beside Maya, his presence solid and comforting. The spotlights, once just a distant glow, now enveloped them, warming their skin and making their eyes squint. A murmur of voices spread through the crowd, hundreds of eyes fixed on them. Luna felt her heart pound against her ribs, a wild drum in her chest. Beside her, Maya squeezed her hand, a silent sign of strength. They ascended the few steps, their shoes making a slight sound on the polished wood of the stage. The large oak beneath which the stage was set seemed to embrace them, its leaves rustling softly in the breeze, as if nature itself were applauding. In the front row, Sergeant Evans waved with a wide smile, his blue eyes filled with profound gratitude. Beside him, Captain Ramirez smiled, a glint of pride in her gaze. Their parents, seated a little further back, sent them encouraging looks. The master of ceremonies' voice, strong and clear, reverberated through the loudspeakers, introducing Captain Ramirez. She walked onto the stage with firm steps, her uniform impeccable. Silence fell over the crowd, a sound of collective breathing filling the air. "Good morning, everyone," Captain Ramirez began, her voice echoing. "We are here today to celebrate an act of extraordinary bravery, a testament to the power of intuition, courage, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals." She paused, her gaze sweeping over Luna, Maya, and finally Ranger. Twins Luna and Maya, alongside their incredible friend and hero Ranger, accomplished a feat that defies logic and medicine. They, guided solely by a dog's instincts, saved Sergeant Evans' life. The crowd erupted in an even stronger round of applause, a sea of hands clapping in celebration. Ranger let out a soft bark, almost a greeting, and wagged his tail, seeming to understand that he too was the focus of this acclaim. Luna felt a warmth spread through her body, a mixture of shyness and pride. Maya, more at ease, gave Ranger a gentle pat on the head. Captain Ramirez continued, detailing the events of that fateful day, the internal bleeding, the rare medication, Ranger's persistence. Each word painted a vivid picture of danger and salvation. When she finished, Sergeant Evans, with visible effort, rose from his chair and walked onto the stage. His presence, still a little fragile, was a living testament to the miracle that had occurred. "I owe my life to them," Sergeant Evans said, his voice a little hoarse, but laden with palpable emotion. He looked directly at Luna and Maya. "You not only acted with a courage many adults wouldn't have, but you also listened to the purest voice of nature, the voice of a loyal friend. Ranger isn't just my partner, he's a guardian angel. And you, girls, are my angels too." Tears streamed down Sergeant Evans' face, and Luna felt a lump in her throat. He turned to Captain Ramirez, who held two small velvet boxes. "In recognition of your exceptional courage, discernment, and the demonstration of an indomitable spirit, it is with great honor that we award Luna and Maya the Park Ranger Civic Merit Medal." Captain Ramirez opened the boxes, revealing two round silver medals engraved with the Park Ranger insignia. She pinned one medal to Luna's chest and the other to Maya's. The cold metal touched their skin, a new and significant weight. A camera flash went off, followed by another and another, illuminating the stage like small lightning bolts. And for Ranger, Captain Ramirez announced, for his remarkable intelligence, unwavering loyalty, and for guiding his heroines in their most critical moment, we award him the K9 Valor Commendation. She placed a special leather collar with an engraved plaque around Ranger's neck. The dog let out a joyful bark and wagged his tail so hard his entire body swayed. The Master of Ceremonies returned to the stage. We would like to invite Luna and Maya to say a few words. Luna felt panic rise in her throat, but Maya's gaze calmed her. She took a step forward, holding the microphone with trembling hands. The crowd waited in expectant silence. We just want to say thank you, Luna began, her voice a thread. She looked at Ranger, who gazed at her with his deep brown eyes. He was the one who knew what to do. He's the real hero. Maya took the microphone. Yes, she added more confidently. He showed us, and Sergeant Evans is a very good person. We're happy he's okay. Their simple, direct, and sincere words touched the crowd in a way an elaborate speech never could. Another wave of applause rose, warm and genuine. As they descended from the stage, the medals swaying gently on their chests, Luna and Maya felt a lightness they hadn't felt since the day of the rescue. The flutter in their stomachs was still there, but now it was mixed with a sense of peace. They had faced their fears, accepted the gratitude, and acknowledged the true hero. The sound of applause accompanied them, a chorus of recognition that seemed to finally appease the storm of fame, transforming it into a sweet melody of acceptance. That sound now was no longer a threat, but a song of victory that enveloped them as they walked towards an uncertain future, yet one filled with new possibilities. As they descended from the stage, the medals gleamed discreetly against the simple fabric of their clothes. The crowd, once a distant mass, now approached, their faces smiling and full of admiration. Hands reached out for a handshake. Voices spoke words of gratitude and congratulations. Luna felt a slight push from the human wave, but the park rangers, discreetly positioned, formed a security cordon, guiding the family away from the direct reach of the press and the more euphoric public. Sergeant Evans, with a smile that lit up his still somewhat pale face, was the first to reach them. He hugged them, a warm and genuine gesture. "You were incredible," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Ranger, by his side, let out a soft bark, as if agreeing, and nudged his head against Luna's hand. Captain Ramirez shook each of the girls' hands, her eyes conveying deep respect. "You represent the best of our community, girls, and Ranger, you are a legend." Their parents, their eyes welling with pride, enveloped them in a collective embrace, the familiar smell of home bringing instant comfort amidst the commotion. The discreet park ranger car waited, and soon they were inside, away from the still flashing cameras and the slowly dissipating crowd's buzz. The drive back home was filled with a different kind of silence than the journey there. It wasn't the silence of anxiety, but of exhaustion and reflection. Luna felt the weight of the medal on her chest, a cold metal that now felt warm, pulsing with the meaning of that day. Maya, in the seat beside her, stroked Ranger's head, who slept soundly, the K9 Valor Commendation gleaming on his neck. There were so many people," Luna finally said, her voice a thread. Maya nodded without opening her eyes. "They seemed happy. Sergeant Evans was happy." Their mother, from the front seat, turned to look at them. "You did a wonderful job, my daughters. Not only did you save a life, but you inspired many people today." Their father, driving, added, "The way you credited Ranger. That was the most beautiful thing of all." Upon arriving home, the silence that awaited them was almost shocking after the park's cacophony. The house felt like a refuge, a safe harbor. The girls took off their ceremony clothes, reverently placing their medals in their drawers, alongside small childhood treasures. Ranger, after a good meal of kibble, curled up in his bed, the heavy sleep of an exhausted hero. In the days that followed, life didn't exactly return to normal. The phone, which had fallen silent on the morning of the ceremony, began to ring again, but with a different tone. These were no longer journalists seeking a scoop, but invitations for local TV shows, for charity events, for school talks about park safety and the role of service animals. A university even offered future scholarships to the girls, citing their extraordinary courage and perceptiveness. Luna and Maya spent hours talking with their parents about what to do. The idea of being role models or speakers was daunting. They were still just Luna and Maya, the girls who loved exploring the forest, but the experience had changed them. They saw the impact of their actions, the gratitude in Sergeant Evans's eyes, the admiration of the crowd. "Maybe we could talk about Ranger," Luna suggested one day while throwing a ball for the dog in the backyard. "About how smart he is, and about how important it is to listen to animals." Maya agreed, her eyes shining with new determination. "Yes, and about how important the park is, and how we should take care of it." That was the beginning of new possibilities. Not a life of empty fame, but a chance to use their experience for good. They had a voice now, an unexpected platform, and with Ranger by their side, they were ready to use it. The storm of attention hadn't completely dissipated, but they had found a way to navigate it, transforming it into a wind that propelled them towards a greater purpose. The sound of Ranger's joyful bark as he brought the ball back was the melody of their new path. The melody resonated in Luna and Maya's hearts, and they began to take their first steps. The first opportunity arose a few weeks later, an invitation to speak at the local elementary school, the same one they attended before moving closer to the park. The idea of returning as heroines was, for Luna, almost as daunting as the day they found Sergeant Evans. Maya, on the other hand, saw it as a chance to share Ranger's story and the importance of caring for nature. On the appointed day, the school gymnasium was packed. The buzz of children, an animated and impatient sound, filled the air and made Luna's heart pound in her chest. Ranger, his commendation collar gleaming discreetly, was calm beside them, his strong and constant presence a balm. The principal, a man with a deep voice and glasses perched on his nose, introduced them with an enthusiasm that seemed to amplify Luna's anxiety. "And now," he announced, his voice reverberating through the microphone and echoing off the gymnasium walls, "our own heroines, Luna and Maya, and their incredible friend, Ranger." A thunderous round of applause erupted, mixed with shouts of "Ranger! Ranger!" The dog, already accustomed to the attention, wagged his tail vigorously, the soft sound of his tail thumping on the floor. Luna felt her legs tremble as she stepped onto the stage. Maya, taking the microphone, smiled at the audience of curious and admiring faces. "Hello, everyone," Maya began, her voice clear and confident. "We're very happy to be here, and we want to introduce you to the true hero of our story, Ranger." She bent down and stroked Ranger's head, who let out a happy bark, a sound the children returned with laughter and more applause. Luna, seeing Maya's ease, felt some of her nervousness dissipate, like a fog lifting. "Ranger taught us a very important lesson," Luna said, finally taking the microphone, her voice still a little shaky, but gaining strength with each word. "He taught us to listen to what animals are trying to tell us, even if they don't speak with words." She described the day in the park, the initial frustration of not being able to understand Ranger, the discovery of the emergency protocol, The children listened intently, their eyes wide with admiration. When Luna mentioned the moment Ranger forced her to see the sergeant's vest, a chorus of "oh" and "ah" echoed through the gymnasium, mixed with whispers. Maya took the microphone again. The national park is a magical place, full of wildlife, and it's very important to take care of it, of all the animals and plants that live there. Ranger is a park ranger, and he shows us how important it is to protect nature. Ranger, as if understanding every word, sat upright and looked at the audience, an attentive and majestic guardian. The girls answered questions, some funny, others surprisingly profound. "Can Ranger talk?" a child asked, and a soft laugh spread. "How did you know it was an injection?" another inquired, her brow furrowed in concentration. At the end of the talk, the principal thanked them warmly. "You are not just heroines, but also messengers. Messengers of a vital message about empathy, courage, and the wisdom of nature." Descending from the stage, the children's buzz turned into a rush to touch him. Ranger, patient and gentle, accepted pets and pats from small hands. Luna and Maya, now more relaxed, smiled as they walked among the students, the medals on their chests catching the light, a physical reminder of their journey. In the days and weeks that followed, the talks became more frequent. Schools, community centers, and even an event for a service dog foundation. Each time, Luna felt a little more confident, her voice becoming firmer and more resonant. Maya, always the more outgoing, blossomed in the role, her passion for the park evident in every sentence. Ranger was the main attraction, his charismatic presence calming the girls' nerves and enchanting everyone with his soft barks and tail wags. They spoke about the importance of respecting wildlife, about park safety, but above all, about Ranger, about how he had been the link, the guide, the true hero. Their story became a beacon, inspiring others to see their own pets in a new light, to trust their instincts, and to value the nature that surrounded them. One afternoon, as they returned from a talk in a neighboring town, their father drove, the radio playing a soft, familiar melody. Luna and Maya were in the back seat, Ranger sleeping soundly at their feet, the sound of his rhythmic breathing filling the car. "You're becoming true ambassadors," their father said, a proud smile on his face reflected in the rearview mirror. "It's strange," Luna confessed, her gaze lost in the trees passing by the window. "At first, I just wanted everything to go back to normal, but now it feels like we're doing something important." Maya nodded, leaning her head on Luna's shoulder. "It's like Ranger gave us a mission, not just to save Sergeant Evans, but to tell his story, so more people understand." Their mother turned from the front seat, her eyes shining. "And you're doing it beautifully. But remember, this is just the beginning. There's so much more you can do." Those words hung in the air, full of a meaning that Luna and Maya couldn't yet fully comprehend. The car continued its journey, the soft hum of the engine lulling them. As the national park trees passed by the window, a silent reminder of where it all began. They had found a purpose, a voice, and the path ahead, though uncertain, now seemed less daunting and more like an adventure to be lived. There was a sense that their story, far from ending, was just beginning to unfold in even grander chapters. It was a quiet late afternoon, but for Luna and Maya, the stillness was merely a prelude, and adventure indeed would soon manifest in its most ambitious form. Whispers of their story had traveled far, reaching ears that valued the courage and uniqueness of their experience. Invitations continued to arrive, but one in particular stood out, a heavy envelope bearing the seal of the National Park Service. Luna and Maya opened it together, Luna's heart beating a rapid rhythm. Inside, a formal letter invited them to a meeting in Washington, D.C., with the director of the National Park Service. The proposal was to create a national educational program inspired by their story and Rangers, focused on the importance of animal intuition and wildlife conservation. The meeting room in Washington was imposing, with windows overlooking historical monuments. Luna felt a lump in her throat, but Maya's encouraging gaze and Ranger's soft sigh at her feet gave her strength. Sergeant Evans, now fully recovered and with a warm smile, stood beside them, a silent and constant support. The director, a woman with a serious demeanor but kind eyes, laid out the vision. A program called The Guardians of Intuition, where Luna and Maya, with Ranger, would travel the country, sharing their story in schools and national park visitor centers. They would speak about attentive listening, about connection with nature, and about the courage that comes from unexpected places. Your story, and especially Ranger's, is a powerful testament, the director said, her voice resonating with conviction. It reminds us that wisdom can come in all forms and that nature has much to teach us if we are willing to listen. Luna and Maya accepted, not with initial hesitation, but with a certainty that had blossomed in their hearts. It was the mission Ranger had given them, now amplified to a national stage. The following months were a whirlwind of travel and presentations. They visited majestic parks, from the Rocky Mountains to the humid swamps, and each new location brought a different audience, but the same admiration and curiosity. Ranger, the furry ambassador, was always the center of attention, his gentle barks and tail wags winning hearts wherever he went. Luna, who once could barely speak in public, now expressed herself with clarity and passion, describing the urgency in Ranger's eyes, the moment when the dog's intuition became the key to survival. Maya, with her natural charisma, painted vivid pictures of the park's beauty and the fragility of its ecosystems, advocating for the need to protect every creature and every tree. Sergeant Evans, often present, shared his park ranger perspective, the importance of safety protocols, and his eternal gratitude for his life, having been saved by a dog and two young girls. Their story, told and retold, inspired children and adults to look at their own pets with new respect and at nature with renewed curiosity. The Guardians of Intuition program was not just a series of talks, it became a movement. Schools began implementing animal listening days, and families were encouraged to explore their local parks with an open mind to the lessons nature could offer. Donations to service dog organizations and conservation funds increased dramatically. One afternoon, Luna and Maya sat on a park bench in one of the many national parks they visited, watching a group of children drawing birds and trees, inspired by their morning talk. Ranger was nestled at their feet, the sun warming his fur. The soft sound of the wind in the leaves was a constant reminder of their beginning. Who would have thought it would all start with an injured sergeant and a persistent dog? Luna said, a tranquil smile on her lips. Maya touched the medal on her chest, which she now wore almost constantly. A talisman. Ranger didn't just save Sergeant Evans for us. He saved us from an ordinary life. He showed us that we have a voice and a purpose. A soft bark from Ranger, as if agreeing, made the girl smile. He lifted his head, his intelligent eyes fixed on the horizon, where the mountains met the sky. The sound of his bark was the melody of a journey that, though full of challenges, had led them to a place of profound meaning. They were no longer just Luna and Maya, the girls who loved exploring the forest. They were the guardians of intuition, messengers of a simple yet profound truth, that the greatest wisdom often comes from the purest connection with the natural world and its inhabitants. And with Ranger by their side, the loyal German shepherd who transformed their lives, they knew the adventure was far from over. In fact, for Luna, Maya, and their faithful friend Ranger, this was just the beautiful and promising dawn of a new era.